The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina Mackenzie.
Now, the book called Pretend They Are Dead is a gripping memoir of survival, trauma and resilience. Its author and our first guest grew up rejected by two men, both claiming to be his father, but neither proved to be a dad. He joins us to tell us his story. Welcome to the show, Stephen Scott Eichenblatt.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here from Orlando, Florida.
Wow, you're in Orlando.
Yes.
What time is it there at the moment then?
It's 8:25 and it's almost 90 degrees. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, I should say good morning to you then, not good afternoon.
That's right. There you go. It's all good though.
Yes. So let's go back then. Your father, I'm guessing your biological father, was Alan Nessel, and he abandoned you and your siblings when you were about 8?
That's right. He had separated from my mother, and we saw him every once in a while, like visitation. And then when we were about 8, he left and didn't come back.
And did you, at the time, have any idea why he left?
Just, when you're 6 or 7 years old and you see your parents fighting, part of it is, this is just normal. This is how parents act. This is how they behave, because I was so used to it in my house. But he was a veterinarian, and he spent a lot of time at work, and then he spent a lot of time when he was at home, locked in his home office. So there wasn't a lot of communication between him and my mom, and there wasn't a lot of interaction with his kids. There's 3 of us. And one day they just basically said, your father's moving out. And that was it. That was it.
Wow. So your mother eventually remarried. So I'm guessing your stepfather was Richard?
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell us a bit about him? What was life like with Richard?
Sure. Life with Richard was terrible. When you're 8 years old, your father disappears. And then shortly afterwards, I'm not exactly sure how much time went by, a few months. We went on a family, my grandparents took the 3 kids on a family trip. We come home, and this is in New Jersey, and we show up, and there's Richard, our new father, and his 4 kids. And we were just basically thrown together. They moved into our house, and he was a really severe disciplinarian, really hard on the rules. So one of the first things he did when we first got there, and I think I'd met him once at the most, but was he laid down rules saying, like, we weren't allowed to walk in the front door, we were not allowed to sit on the furniture, we weren't allowed in the kitchen, we were not allowed to eat meals with our parents. Just really strict rules. And then basically we're giving like room assignments, like you're in the Army or something, where, okay, Steve, you're not going to be living with my brother Mark, who I didn't know, but all of a sudden we're sharing a room, and there was 9 of us. So it was really chaotic right from the beginning, and it kind of grew worse over time.
Oh my goodness, sounds shocking. And he treated his own children like that as well as you guys.
Yes, he definitely was. There was 7 kids within 5 years, so some were a lot younger, but he treated us all the same, which is not good.
Crikey. Then I read that when you were 16 years old, your biological father literally crashed back into your life.
When I was 16, and by that time I had already I was adopted by Richard, so my name changed from Nessel to Eichenblatt. So, which was traumatic in and of itself, just because when you're a middle school kid and all of a sudden you show up and you have a different last name, and your parents have been through a divorce, and nobody else in your class has had parents who have been through a divorce or name changes. I mean, kids are cruel. Yeah. So I was going through that, and I got a job working at a tennis court as the maintenance guy, and sweeping the court, rolling the court, there clay courts. And one day, it was the 4th of July, 1975, which in the U.S., 4th of July, of course, is Independence Day, and lots of fireworks, and there were certainly fireworks for me that day, because on that day when I was 16, I was the only person at the tennis courts. I was sweeping the end court near a road, a road that had a pretty decent amount of traffic. And as I was sweeping the courts, I hear a car skidding, that screeching sound when they're burning rubber. I smell the tires like burning, and I heard this tremendous crash. And I looked up, hearts racing, and a car had run into a telephone pole probably 50 feet or so from where I was standing. Now, this happened 60 years ago at this point. But I can remember every single detail, because witnessing something catastrophic like that, which I don't know if you have, but it's not something that ever like completely leaves you. And my heart was pounding. I didn't know what to do. I'd never seen a ran crash before. I ran to the car. The guy was, his head was through the windshield and he was unconscious. So I ran to the payphone to try to call for help. And then after I called for help, I could hear sirens coming. I ran back to where he was. And by that time, some other people had shown up and they pulled him out of the car. His face was bloody and everything else. And he was in bad shape. And they took out his ID and said, "Does anybody know this man?" And I listened, and I knew him, of course, but I got on my bike, I rode away, and didn't tell anybody for 40 years that man was my father.
Oh, my goodness. Was it purposely that it couldn't have been a coincidence that you were there, presumably?
Well, years later, I discovered through and you'll hear a lot about this or read this in the book, but I discovered after he died that he had been a writer, not just a veterinarian, and he kept journals and a diary of everything that happened for like 30 years in his life. He would sit and just type. And he wrote in full detail about the accident and what happened and how he had gone to his veterinary office and decided that he was going to take some Valium. He took 3 Valium, drank some vodka, and he writes this in very full detail. And he had hired a private investigator to locate us because he wanted pictures, because he wasn't allowed to have pictures. He found out that I worked at this tennis court, and he got in his car and he drove by, and he hits, the next thing he knows, he hits a telephone pole. He's unconscious. He wakes up and he sees me, and he writes this, that he says, I look up and through my eye that was hanging and everything else, I see a teenage boy, Steve, and that's question mark. So, so he knew I was there, and it's really a really very crazy, bizarre story in a lot of ways, because to give you another example, he then was sued, and this is all from writing this is all him writing later about it and me seeing the writing after he died. He was sued by the president of the tennis club because the telephone pole had hit the fence and destroyed, cost of the club some money, property damage. And the president of the tennis club was my adopted father, Richard Eichenblatt.
Oh, my goodness. You couldn't make it up, could you?
No, yeah, that's right. And I never knew that. And so it also struck me that Richard and my mother knew that my biological father had been in this accident. They didn't know I was there, but they knew that. And not only did they not tell me about it, they decided to threaten him with a lawsuit unless he paid them the money for the damage. So what he did, to take it a step further, and this is just one little slice of my life in the book, but so what he did, Alan Nessel, is he got one of his employees, and I got a full story from her recently about it, and he decided to go to a hardware store, a place where he could buy letters, lettering, metal letters. And he bought his initials, ASN, Alan S. Nessel, and he had her drive him to the tennis court at night, and he proceeded to nail the letters into the telephone pole because in his mind, he now owned the pole since he had to pay for it.
Oh,
so,
my goodness.
So it's insane, right? Who does that? I mean, like, I was like reading this going, you got to be kidding me. Like, who does that? So I actually got in touch with the person that worked for him. I tracked her down, and she said, absolutely truth. That's the 100% truth. He was insistent. He was insistent on going there and putting those letters into the poll.
Wow. So your biological father survived the crash. That isn't when he died. He survived that.
Yes.
And
yeah.
did you get to talk to him then between then and when he died, or did you never have any contact?
I actually, when I was 20, I decided that I wanted to confront him. I've been stuck with this other man who was on paper. My adopted father was my father. We went to adoption, but he wasn't my birth father. So I decided that I was going to confront my biological father. And I lived in Florida at the time. We had moved to Florida. So I went to New Jersey where he was, and he was still working as a veterinarian. And I knocked on his door, and it took a lot. And even now I look back going, man, I had a lot of courage really for doing that, because to knock on his door unannounced, and not know what you're going to say or do or whatever, it was just kind of something I felt like I needed to do. So when I did that and I walked in, the reception at the little, you get the little bell at the front desk, and you're supposed to sign in. And she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm here to see Dr. Nessel." And just then he walked out. The door opens. He walks out. He looked terrible, like really skinny, scarred face. And he looks at me and he says, "Can I help you?" And I was confused because he didn't recognize me. And he said, "Well, we're going to lunch, so you're going to have to see us later." And I said, "Well, Dr. Nessel, I'm your son, Steve." And that caught him clearly by surprise. And so we had a reunion of sorts where, I was able to connect and talk to him and hear sort of his side of the story. He was a damaged person. Mm-hmm. He really, somebody with a brain, sort of like with a brain injury, he mumbled. It turned out he had some drug-related issues, hence the Valium. But I did find out that I had another brother and sister that I didn't know about. And I was able to, and I write about that in the book because I met my half-sister and we became very, very, very close. But I didn't really keep much contact with him because he was so disturbed and so difficult. He was just a dark, difficult person and tortured that it was really it wasn't fun talking to him. It wasn't like, you hang up and you feel like you've just been to a funeral when you talk to him because he's so dark.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because you sort of would have liked it to have been a nice reunion. But did you ask him about the crash? Did you ask him why he did it?
I never asked him. And looking back now, or looking back when I sat down and I got his writing, I think I had buried it so deep that I didn't want it to come out. I didn't want to even talk about it. I didn't know if he saw me. His face was heavily damaged, scarred, and I knew that was from the accident. And I found out that he'd had like major surgeries, and he basically should have died right in front of me, and thankfully he didn't. But I never did ask him about it. I think it would have been really uncomfortable. And I mean, he was a difficult person to talk to anyway. And when he did eventually die years later, I went to his funeral, and that's when I found out he had been a writer, and he had left all this. He had been published. He'd been published in magazines. He taught writing at the New School in New York, which is an excellent school in New York, well known. And it turned out he's a pretty brilliant, though disturbed person.
Wow. Yeah. You've followed in his footsteps only in one way, I'm sure, but you've become a writer as well, because this isn't your first book, is it?
Well, I've written short stories before, but this is my first full publication. And as a lawyer, I had been doing a lot of writing. But after I went through a few divorces myself, I always had problems with relationships because of the trauma. I sat down with all of his writing, and that's when I decided to write a book. But it took like 10 years because there's thousands of pages.
And do you think you became a lawyer because of your childhood?
I think, yes, I definitely think that I wanted to help people, wanted to help families, wanted to help children who had been in this situation. I mean, in divorce, look, divorce is obviously it's a very highly emotional situation for any family, but you got to keep your eye on the ball and not sacrifice your kids. They become collateral damage. I mean, your kids, they see, they hear everything you do, even if you don't think they do. They're listening and they're watching and you're setting examples. And too many times kids are stuck in the middle and they become totally traumatized, or they wind up in the foster care system, or kids that have been through abuse. And so I've made it, part of my mission in life is to help those families, talk to kids that have gone through it, talk to dads, teach people how to be a better dad, and also, and moms too, and also teach or talk to people about, we've all had something bad happen in our life. I'm sorry, it's just going to happen at some point, and in some ways we all become victims at some point in our life, but you don't have to stay a victim. My thing is, don't be a victim, be a victor. And it's powerful. Yeah,
well, you certainly are a victor and a survivor. And I know you've got 5 children of your own now.
That's right. Right. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Stephen, why the title, Pretend They Are Dead?
So as I was describing getting all of his writing, there was, and thousands of pages of letters and all these things that he'd written. He always mentioned one article, but he wrote a lot to his cousin, his first cousin. And this is all like typewritten pages and pages and pages, but he'd always say, I don't want my kids ever to see Hello Yellow, and I didn't know what Hello Yellow was. Well, years later, my cousin sent it to me. It was an article that he had published in the mid-1970s about the last night he spent with us. So Hello Yellow was a poem that apparently in the middle of the night, I got up and said I made up this poem called Hello Yellow. And I didn't know, nor did my brother or sister, that we would never see him after that. He spent that night with us knowing that he would be dropping us off and never seeing us again, giving us up for adoption. And his rationalization, as he writes in the story, and this is part of my book, but as he writes in the story, is that he went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, it's just better if you just pretend they are dead. And that way you don't have to think about them.
Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, they say truth is stranger than fiction. It's an amazing, amazing story. So our listeners can buy it right now from our website, TRE.radio. It's called Pretend They Are Dead, A Father's Search for the Truth. It's by Stephen Scott Eichenblatt, who we're speaking to now. Now, Stephen, if people want to find out about you and your other writing, do you have a website as well?
I do, under Stephen Scott Eichenblatt. And also, I have a law firm, Page, Page, and Eichenblatt. And listen, if anybody's out there and they have problems that they want to discuss and looking for practical solutions in their family or with their kids, I have access to a lot of resources or can give you direction. I don't care what country you live in. I try to help everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being so open and honest, Stephen.
You're welcome, and I appreciate you having me on, and I hope people will support me and buy the book and write me a nice review.
I'm sure they will. You take care now.
All right, you take care too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.